At the will reading, my son-in-law muttered, "She won't live long enough to spend that money." The words echoed in my mind, even though they were whispered under his breath, as if I wasn't supposed to hear them. But I did, and I'll never forget them. I'd spent years loving this family, caring for them, supporting them in every way I could. And this was how they repaid me? I wasn't sure what hurt more, the words or the cold realization that I had no one left to trust. As the lawyer continued reading the rest of the will, I felt a tight knot in my chest. Everyone else in the room was hanging on every word, waiting to hear who would inherit what. But I had already heard enough. I'd heard the truth. My son-in-law, Peter, the man who I had welcomed into my family with open arms, had already decided my fate. But I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not this time. The room felt like it was closing in on me, but I kept my composure. I didn't flinch, didn't make a sound. I had spent too many years putting up with the little things, the subtle betrayals, the snide comments, and the cold shoulders. But now, it was time to take control. I wasn't about to be pushed aside, not by him, not by anyone. When the lawyer finished, I stood up slowly, my legs shaky, but my resolve firm. "I'll need to speak with you privately," I said, my voice steady. The lawyer, who had been avoiding eye contact with me, nodded, clearly relieved that the reading was over. I walked out of the room, feeling their eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I had made my decision. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about respect. It was about reclaiming my life. And I was going to do it, no matter how hard it was. The family I thought I knew, the one I had devoted my entire life to, was nothing more than a facade. And now, I was going to tear it down. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them win. They thought they could take everything from me, but they were wrong. It was time for me to take back what was mine. The night after the will reading, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the family portraits hanging on the wall. The house felt emptier now, the silence louder than it had ever been before. Charles had passed away 3 years ago, but his presence still lingered in every corner of this place. I could still smell his cologne on the pillows, feel his warmth in the chair beside me. It was as if the house had been frozen in time, but everything had changed. The once lively dinners, the family gatherings, they were all memories now. I had never imagined that I would be the one left out, that I would be the one cast aside, abandoned by the very people I had spent my life caring for. I hadn't expected it to be Peter, not the way he had looked at me with such coldness after Charles's death. I had always thought of him as a son, but now, I could see through his mask. His words at the will reading had shattered everything. "She won't live long enough to spend that money." They stung, but they also woke something inside me. I had been too passive, too forgiving for too long. I had spent my life making sure everyone else was happy, putting their needs above my own. But now, I had to look out for myself. As I sat there, the flickering light from the fireplace casting long shadows on the walls, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them treat me like this. I wasn't going to be a burden or an afterthought in my own life. I reached for my phone and dialed the number of the lawyer who had read Charles's will. My hands were trembling, but I refused to let fear take hold of me. "I need to see you tomorrow," I said, my voice steady. "There's something I need to discuss." I hung up the phone and leaned back in the chair, taking a deep breath. Tomorrow, I would take the first step in reclaiming my life. The next morning, I drove to the lawyer's office, the drive giving me time to think, to prepare myself for what was to come. I had spent too many years being overlooked, pushed aside, and dismissed. Not anymore. I arrived at the lawyer's office, a small, quiet building nestled in the heart of the city. Inside, the lawyer greeted me with a polite smile, but I could see the nervousness in his eyes. He had always been kind to me, but I knew he was uncomfortable with the situation. He didn't want to get involved in a family dispute, especially one involving money. "Mrs. Adams," he said as he gestured for me to sit. "I understand you wanted to discuss something regarding the will." "Yes," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "I want to know what my options are. I want to make sure that what is mine stays with me." The lawyer hesitated, clearly unsure of how to respond. "You're referring to the estate?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "The house, the money, everything. I've spent my whole life building this family, and I won't let them take it from me. I need to know what I can do to protect myself." The lawyer nodded slowly, his fingers tapping nervously on the desk. "I can help you with that," he said. "But you need to understand, this is going to be a fight. You'll need to be prepared for the consequences. I looked him straight in the eye. I've already been through the worst of it. I can handle whatever comes next. After the meeting, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I had control over my own life. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for whatever it took. I wasn't going to let Peter or Laura push me out. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. That night, I sat in the same chair where I had heard those cruel words, and I made a vow to myself. I would fight for my place in this family. I would fight for the legacy Charles and I had built together, and I would never let them see me as weak again. The following week, I received a call from Laura. She asked if I could meet her for lunch, just the two of us. My first instinct was to decline, but then I remembered something Charles had always said: keep your enemies close. I agreed to meet her, even though the idea of facing her again made my stomach turn. When I arrived at the restaurant, she was already seated at a corner table, her back straight, her expression one I had come to recognize all too well over the past few years. Calm, collected, but with an edge of calculation. "Mom," she said, offering a tight smile. "I'm glad you could make it." I nodded, sitting down across from her. The air between us was thick with unspoken tension. "How have you been?" she asked, though her voice lacked the warmth it once had. I could tell she wasn't asking out of genuine concern. This was business, pure and simple. "I've been fine," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "I've been thinking about a few things." Laura looked at me, her eyes flickering for just a moment, but she quickly masked it with that practiced smile. "What about?" she asked. I wasn't sure where to begin, so I just said the first thing that came to mind. Peter's comment at the will reading. You know, the one about me not living long enough to spend the money. Well-being. This was about securing her future. "So what are you saying?" I asked, my voice steady, even though everything inside me was screaming. "Are you telling me I have to step aside?" Laura didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked around the restaurant, making sure no one was paying attention. "I'm saying that you have options," she finally said, her tone low. "You can either continue living here, being a part of the family, or you can sell the house and take the money. It's your choice. But you have to understand, we've been planning for the future, and that future doesn't include you holding on to the past." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. The nerve, the audacity. For years, I had sacrificed everything for this family, and now, my own daughter was telling me I didn't belong, that I was holding them back. "Is that what you really think?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "That I'm holding you back? That I'm a burden?" She didn't flinch. "It's not personal, Mom. It's just business." I stood up, my hands trembling as I grabbed my purse. "Well, let me tell you something, Laura," I said, my voice cutting through the air. "I'm not some business deal. I'm your mother. And if you think you can just push me aside like this, you're gravely mistaken." I turned to leave, but then I paused, looking back at her one last time. "You may have taken everything else from me, but you'll never take my dignity. I may not have the money or the power you think I should have, but I have something far stronger." I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes for the first time, but I didn't wait for her to respond. I walked out of the restaurant, feeling the weight of the decision I had just made. I wasn't going to let Laura and Peter take everything from me. I wasn't going to be silenced or pushed aside. I still had a future, and it was one that I would control. The days that followed were filled with a deep sense of change, a shift I had never imagined possible. Every time I stepped into the house, I could feel the weight of everything that had transpired. The silence in the hallways seemed louder, more oppressive. It was as if I was walking through a memory, a life I had built, that was now slipping away. I spent hours sitting in my favorite chair, gazing out the window at the yard where Charles and I had planted the rose bushes together. It had always been our little project, a symbol of our life together. Now, it felt like a painful reminder of everything I had lost. As I sat there, a realization slowly began to form in my mind. Laura and Peter thought they had won. They thought they had pushed me aside, made me irrelevant. But I wasn't ready to give up just yet. I was stronger than they thought. I wasn't going to let them steal everything from me. I had one more card to play. I knew that Charles had left me something in the will, something that could help me regain control. But I also knew that I couldn't rely on the lawyer alone to help me figure it out. I had to take matters into my own hands. I spent the next few days going through every document Charles had left behind. The more I looked, the more I realized just how much he had truly cared for me, how much he had trusted me. He had always been the one to make sure everything was taken care of, to handle the business side of things while I focused on the family. But now, I had to handle it myself. And I was ready. One afternoon, I found a letter tucked away in the back of one of the drawers. It was addressed to me, written in Charles's familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I unfolded it, my heart racing with anticipation. As I read through the letter, a sense of calm washed over me. Charles had left me the final say on everything. He had known that there would come a time when I would need to take control, and he had made sure I was prepared. The will, he wrote, had been altered after we had spoken about his health declining. He had made sure that I would be protected, that the estate would remain mine, no matter what happened with the rest of the family. I wasn't helpless. I had power. I could keep the house, the legacy, the life Charles and I had built together. And I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. I knew the battle was far from over. Laura and Peter wouldn't give up easily, but I didn't care. I had the upper hand now. I spent the next few days meeting with my lawyer, ensuring that everything was in order. I wasn't going to just sit back and let them walk all over me. When the time came, I would stand my ground. I would show them that I wasn't the weak, helpless woman they thought I was. I would fight for my home, for my dignity, for my place in this world. And I would make sure they understood just how wrong they were about me. The following Sunday, Laura came to visit, her usual false cheer in place as she knocked on the door. I opened it slowly, my heart steady, knowing exactly what I needed to do. "Mom," she said, her voice high-pitched as if trying to convince herself as much as me. "I think it's time we talk about the house." I smiled, knowing exactly where this was going. "I think we should," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. As she walked past me, I could see the familiar air of entitlement in her every step, the same arrogance that had been there all along. She sat down on the couch, folding her hands in her lap. "Look," she began, "I know things have been difficult, but it's time to be realistic. Peter and I can't keep supporting you like this. You have to understand, the house is too much for you to handle. It's time for you to consider moving." I sat down across from her, my expression calm but firm. "Laura," I said slowly, "you and Peter have been trying to push me out for months, haven't you? You thought I wouldn't notice. You thought I wouldn't fight back. But you were wrong." Laura froze, her eyes widening slightly. I could see the shift in her, the moment she realized I wasn't the woman she could manipulate so easily anymore. "I've been doing things on my terms for a long time," I continued, "and I won't let you take my home from me. This house is mine. Charles made sure of that, and I'm not going anywhere." For the first time, Laura's mask slipped. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized that everything she had planned, everything she thought she could control, was slipping away. "You can't do this," she said, her voice trembling now. "I can and I will," I replied, my voice unwavering. "I've spent my whole life taking care of everyone else. It's time for me to take care of myself." She stood up, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief. "You don't understand, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is for your own good." "No, Laura," I said, standing as well. "This is for my future." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, speechless. For the first time in years, I felt free. Free to make my own decisions, to take control of my own life. I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my own daughter, dictate my future. I had won this battle, and now, I was ready for whatever came next. Days passed, and the silence in the house was almost suffocating. I had been through the worst of it, but now that I was standing my ground, it felt like the calm before the storm. I had faced Laura and Peter, but I knew this wasn't over. I had to be ready for whatever they would try next. The house, the inheritance, everything was at stake. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control, a feeling I hadn't had in so long. It was liberating, even though I knew the battle wasn't over. I spent the next few days gathering documents, making sure everything was in order. Charles had been thorough, and I could see now that he had known something like this might happen. He had made sure I was protected. But what had once been a simple family home now felt like a fortress. It was a reminder of everything I had fought for, everything I had sacrificed. I wasn't going to let that be taken from me. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table, going through papers, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door, I found Linda standing there. Linda was a longtime friend of Charles's, someone who had always been kind to me. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said with a warm smile. But there was something in her eyes that made me wonder. Not at all, I replied, stepping aside to let her in. What brings you here? I've been thinking, she began, settling down at the table across from me. About the will, about everything that's been going on. I just want you to know, you're not alone in this. I may not be family, but I care about you, Gloria. And I've been hearing things. Her words made me pause. I sat back in my chair, studying her face. What things? I asked, already knowing the answer. Things about Laura and Peter, she said quietly, glancing around as if to make sure no one else was listening. I think they're planning something that's not going to end well for you. They've been talking about selling the house, about moving you into a retirement home. A chill ran down my spine. I had known they wanted the house, but hearing Linda confirm it made everything feel more real. I suspected as much, I said, my voice steady, though my hands were clenched tightly in my lap. But I'm not going anywhere. Linda nodded, her expression full of sympathy. I don't want to see you pushed out, Gloria. You've been so strong all these years. Don't let them take it from you. I could feel the weight of her words settle in my chest. She was right. I had been strong, but I was starting to realize that strength didn't just come from enduring. It came from fighting back. What do you think I should do? I asked. You need to make sure you're legally protected, Linda said, her voice firm. You can't let them have control. You have a right to this house, to your life. Don't let them make you feel like you don't. I nodded, the resolve in my chest hardening. Linda was right. This was my fight now. Thank you, I said quietly, feeling a sense of gratitude that I hadn't felt in a long time. Linda gave me a reassuring smile. I'm here for you, Gloria. I know this isn't easy, but you don't have to do it alone. As she left, I stood in the doorway, watching her walk down the front steps. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had someone on my side. I wasn't alone in this fight. The next day, I met with my lawyer again, going over everything in detail. I had to make sure I was ready, that every angle was covered. As we went through the papers, I felt a surge of confidence. I wasn't going to let Laura and Peter win. I wasn't going to let them tear apart everything I had worked for. That night, I went to bed with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. I had a plan. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready to face whatever came next. The following week, I received a call from Laura, asking if we could talk. I was surprised, but I agreed. I had a feeling this conversation was coming. When I met her at the cafe, her usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced with something else. Nervousness, maybe even fear. Mom, she began, not meeting my eyes. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I think we need to come to an agreement. I waited, keeping my expression neutral. What kind of agreement? I asked. I know we've had our differences, she said, her voice tight. But I don't want this to turn into a big fight. I think it would be best if we could come to some arrangement with the house. What kind of arrangement? I repeated, my voice steady, but I could feel the tension in the air. She finally looked at me, her eyes full of desperation. I'm asking you to sell it, Mom. I know you're attached to it, but it's too much for you to handle now. We'll take care of everything, I promise. We'll find you a nice place to live. I felt my blood run cold, but I didn't show it. Laura, I said, my voice firm, this house is not for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. This is my home, and I'm not leaving. The look on her face shifted, from desperation to something darker, anger, perhaps even fear. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising slightly. You can't keep holding on to this. You don't have the right. I have every right. I interrupted, my voice unwavering. This house is mine. Charles left it to me, and I'm not giving it up. Not for you. Not for Peter. Not for anyone. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You'll regret this, she said, her tone venomous. You don't know what you're up against. As she stormed out of the cafe, I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. I had stood up to her. I had stood up for myself. And for the first time in a long time, I knew I had made the right choice. It had been a few weeks since my confrontation with Laura, and life seemed to fall into a strange, quiet rhythm. The days felt long, and I spent most of my time at home, sorting through Charles's things, organizing papers, and preparing for what I knew was going to be a long fight. I wasn't sure what was coming next, but I was ready. The phone calls from Laura had stopped, and I hadn't seen Peter since that day. They had made it clear they weren't going to back down easily, but I wasn't backing down either. I had my lawyer, I had the documents, and I had every right to stand my ground. But still, there was a constant sense of unease hanging over me. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just the house or the money. It was about control. It was about power, and I wasn't going to let them take that from me. One evening, as I was sitting in the living room, going through some old photo albums, I received an unexpected knock on the door. My heart skipped a beat, and I hesitated before getting up to answer. When I opened the door, I was surprised to see Martin, Charles's old attorney. He looked a little older than I remembered, but his expression was still warm, kind. "Gloria," he said softly, his voice carrying a hint of concern, "may I come in?" I stepped aside to let him in, feeling an odd sense of relief at seeing him. It had been a long time since I had seen anyone outside the family, and I appreciated the familiarity of his presence. "Of course," I said, leading him into the living room. "What brings you here?" He sat down across from me, his hands folded neatly in his lap. "I know this isn't easy, Gloria," he began, his eyes searching mine. "But there's something I need to tell you. Something Charles wanted you to know, just in case." I frowned, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean? What's going on?" Martin sighed, his gaze dropping to the floor for a moment before meeting my eyes again. "When Charles made his will, he included something for you. Something that wasn't in the public documents. He didn't want anyone to know unless it was absolutely necessary." I felt a surge of curiosity, mixed with a touch of fear. What was this? What was he talking about? "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Martin hesitated before pulling an envelope from his briefcase and handing it to me. I took it, my hands shaking slightly as I opened it. Inside, there was a single piece of paper. It wasn't a legal document. It was a letter from Charles. "To Gloria, my love." I read aloud, my voice cracking as I took in the words. "If you are reading this, then you've come to the moment I feared most. I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter how difficult things become, I am with you. I always will be. You are strong, and you have the power to take control of your life. Do not let anyone make you feel small. Do not let anyone take what is rightfully yours. You have my trust. You have my love, and you always will." I looked up from the letter, my heart pounding. The weight of Charles's words settled in my chest, and I could feel the tears welling up in my eyes. "What does this mean, Martin?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It means," he said, his voice firm, "that Charles left you something that goes beyond money or property. He left you his blessing, his permission to fight for what's yours. And he made sure you'd have the strength to do it." I sat there, stunned, holding the letter close to my chest. The reassurance, the validation I had needed for so long, had been right there, waiting for me. It felt like Charles had reached across time to give me one last gift, one last push to keep going. "But what about Laura and Peter?" I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "What if they come after me harder?" Martin gave me a sympathetic look. "They will, Gloria. They'll try everything to make you feel like you're in the wrong. But this," he gestured, "to the letter, this is all the proof you need. You have Charles's blessing. You have his protection. And you have the legal right to fight for this." I nodded slowly, the weight of it all sinking in. I had been doing this alone, but now, it felt different. Now, I had something more than just documents and lawyers. I had a foundation, a sense of purpose. It was a feeling I hadn't realized I was missing. "Thank you, Martin," I said, my voice quiet but full of gratitude. "This means more than you know." He smiled softly. "You're welcome, Gloria. Just remember, you don't have to face this alone. Charles wanted you to know that, and I'm here for you too." After Martin left, I sat for a long time, reflecting on everything that had happened. It felt like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting for my place in this world, for the respect I deserved. I wasn't going to let anyone push me around. Not Laura, not Peter, no one. I had the strength to stand up for myself. And I would. Whatever came next, I was ready. The following week, as I sat in my favorite armchair, staring at the fireplace, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The chaos that had been consuming me for months seemed to have slowed, but the tension was still there. Laura and Peter hadn't made another move, at least not openly, but I knew they were planning something behind the scenes. I couldn't let my guard down. I had worked too hard to get to this point, and I wasn't about to let them take it all away. I had to be ready. The phone rang, and I quickly reached for it. It was Linda. "Gloria, I just got word," she said, her voice urgent. They're meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Peter's pushing for a quick sale. You need to act fast. My heart skipped a beat. They weren't wasting any time. Thank you for letting me know, Linda. I'll handle it, I said, my voice firm. This isn't over. After hanging up, I felt a new surge of determination. I couldn't sit idly by while they made their move. I had to act now, while I still had the upper hand. I immediately called my lawyer and scheduled an emergency meeting. We went over the details of my case, looking for any possible loopholes or ways to prevent them from selling the house. I was ready to do whatever it took. As I prepared for the upcoming battle, a quiet resolve settled over me. I wasn't going to let Laura or Peter dictate my life anymore. I wasn't going to let them take what was mine. The house wasn't just a building. It was my home, my sanctuary, and a symbol of the life I had shared with Charles. I had every right to protect it. The next morning, I went to the lawyer's office, the familiar feeling of determination filling me as I walked through the door. This time, I wasn't just going in to receive advice. I was going in to fight. We discussed every detail, preparing for the possibility of a court battle. It was going to be tough, but I had the law on my side. And I had something more, something that no one could take from me, my strength. As I left the office, I felt a sense of purpose. I was ready. Later that day, Laura called me. Her voice was tight, almost as if she had been rehearsing what she was going to say. Mom, we need to talk, she said. I know things have been tense, but we need to come to an agreement about the house. I let out a breath, keeping my voice calm. I already told you, Laura, the house is not for sale. It's mine. There was a long pause on the other end. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising slightly. This is for your own good. Peter and I have been trying to do what's best for everyone, but you're making it so much harder than it needs to be. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, but I kept it in check. I don't need you to tell me what's best for me, I said, my voice steady. This house is my home, and I'm not giving it up. You've been trying to manipulate me for months, Laura, and I'm done with it. There was silence on the other end of the line before she spoke again. You don't get it, do you? Peter's already made arrangements with a realtor. We're going to sell it, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. My heart pounded in my chest, but I didn't let her hear my panic. I don't care what you've arranged with a realtor, I said, my voice cold. This house is mine, and I'm not going anywhere. The conversation ended with a click, but I didn't feel any satisfaction. I knew she wasn't going to give up easily. As the days passed, I spent my time organizing my documents and preparing for what I knew was coming. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. I would fight for what was rightfully mine. Late one afternoon, as I was looking over some papers, I heard the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced out the window. It was Laura and Peter. I stood up, my hands trembling slightly, but I took a deep breath and walked to the door. When I opened it, they were standing there, their expressions cold and determined. We need to talk, Mom, Laura said, her voice flat. I didn't invite them inside. There's nothing left to talk about, I replied, my voice firm. I told you, the house is not for sale. And I'm not leaving. Peter stepped forward, his face twisting with frustration. You don't understand, he spat, his voice low. We're doing this for you. You're too old to take care of this place. You don't have the money to keep it up. This is the best thing for you. I stood my ground, refusing to let his words affect me. I don't need your help, Peter, I said, my voice steady. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself. You're being selfish, Laura snapped, her eyes flashing with anger. You're holding us all back. This house is just a burden, and you won't let go. This house is not a burden to me, I said, my voice unwavering. It's my home, and I'm not letting you take it away from me. They stood there for a moment, staring at me, but neither of them said anything more. Finally, they turned and walked back to their car without another word. As they drove away, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But I knew this wasn't over. It was just the beginning. I had made it clear that I wouldn't back down, and I wasn't going to stop, fighting until I had secured my future, no matter what it took. The following days were filled with a quiet kind of tension that seemed to stretch on forever. I could feel the weight of what was coming, but I also felt a sense of calm that had been missing for so long. I had made my decision, and now there was no turning back. Laura and Peter had made their move, and I had made mine. But I knew they wouldn't give up easily. They were determined to take what they felt was rightfully theirs, but I wasn't about to let them. The phone rang one afternoon as I was sitting in the living room, sorting through old letters. It was my lawyer, and his voice was urgent. "Gloria, we need to talk. Laura and Peter are pushing for a court date. They filed paperwork, and it looks like they're trying to force this through faster than we anticipated." My stomach dropped, but I didn't let my fears show. "What do we need to do?" I asked, my voice steady. "We need to make sure everything is in order," he said. "You have the legal right to contest this, but we need to make sure we have all the necessary documentation in place. This is going to be a fight, but I believe we can win." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'm ready," I said, my voice filled with determination. "I won't let them take my home. Not without a fight." After the call, I spent the next few days reviewing everything. Every document, every piece of paper that Charles had left behind. I knew this was the moment I had been preparing for, and I wasn't about to back down. As I sat at my kitchen table, the papers spread out in front of me. I could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on me. But I also felt a sense of strength that I hadn't realized was there. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my place in the world. I was fighting for respect, for my dignity, for the life I had built with Charles. I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. A few days later, I received a letter from the court, notifying me of the official hearing. The date was set. It was time. As I stood in front of the courthouse that morning, I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had never imagined that it would come to this, but here I was, ready to face Laura and Peter in a courtroom, ready to take back what was mine. The lawyer greeted me at the entrance, giving me a reassuring nod. "You're ready for this," he said. "We've got everything we need." "I know," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Let's do this." The courtroom was small, and the air felt thick with tension as we all took our seats. Laura and Peter were already there, sitting across from me, their expressions cold. Laura's eyes flicked to mine, but she didn't say a word. Peter sat next to her, his arms crossed, his face tight with frustration. It was clear that they didn't expect me to put up a fight, but I wasn't about to make it easy for them. The proceedings began, and I could feel the weight of their eyes on me. But I held my ground, listening carefully as my lawyer presented our case. I could see the shock on Laura's face as the evidence was laid out, as the documents Charles had left behind were revealed for all to see. I could hear her breath catch in her throat as she realized how thoroughly her plans had been thwarted. The tide was turning in my favor. I wasn't going to let them take everything from me. Not now, not ever. As the hearing continued, I felt a growing sense of clarity. I wasn't fighting just for myself. I was fighting for everything that had been taken from me. For the years I had spent raising a family, for the love and care I had poured into my marriage, for the life that I had built with Charles. And I was going to make sure that no one would take that away from me. The judge finally spoke, and the words were clear. "After reviewing the evidence, I find in favor of Mrs. Adams. The house and the estate are to remain in her possession. The court rules that no sale or transfer can take place without her consent." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The fight was over, and I had won. Laura's face turned pale, and Peter's jaw tightened. In anger. But I didn't care. I had done it. I had stood my ground. As I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of the victory slowly sank in. The fight had been long and hard, but I had won. I wasn't going to let anyone take away my future, my home, or my legacy. I had fought for it, and I had earned it. And I was finally free to move forward, knowing that I had taken control of my life once again. The days following the court ruling felt like a slow, steady wave of relief. It wasn't the kind of relief that came with a sudden rush, but more like the kind of quiet peace that settles in after a long battle. The weight of the last few months lifted from my shoulders, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I was able to breathe freely. The house was still mine, my life was still mine, and I could finally begin to rebuild what had been shaken by Laura and Peter's attempts to push me out. I didn't expect them to come around immediately, and I wasn't disappointed. Laura didn't call. Peter didn't show up at the door. I suppose they were still processing their loss, and in a way, I was grateful for the silence. I needed time to gather my thoughts, to regain the pieces of myself that I had sacrificed over the years. I started going through old photo albums, reminiscing about the times when life was simpler, when I didn't have to worry about betrayal and loss. It was painful, but it was also necessary. It reminded me of the love I had shared with Charles, of the life we had built together. That life was still here, within these walls. I was still here. The phone rang one evening as I was finishing dinner. I looked at the caller ID and saw it was Laura. My first instinct was to ignore it, but then I remembered what Charles had always told me. Always face what comes your way. I picked up the phone. Hello, I said, my voice calm but steady. Mom, Laura said, her voice sounding small and unsure. I wanted to talk. I paused, not sure how to respond. After everything, after all the hurt and the anger, hearing her voice felt like stepping into unfamiliar territory. What is it? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. I've been thinking, she started, her words hesitant, about everything that's happened, about what I said to you. And I want to apologize. There was a long pause on my end. I wasn't sure how to respond. Apologize? Was this real? After everything she had done, after everything she had tried to take from me, I wasn't sure if I could just forgive her like that. But something in her voice made me pause. Maybe it was the sincerity, or maybe it was the exhaustion I could hear in her tone. Why now? I asked quietly, my heart still guarded. I don't know, she said, her voice breaking slightly. I think I've been so focused on what I wanted, what I thought I deserved, that I forgot about you. I forgot about everything you've done for me, for us. I'm sorry. Her words hung in the air, heavy and uncertain. For a moment, I felt my walls begin to crack, but I held them steady. Laura, I said, my voice soft but firm, you hurt me. You tried to take away everything I've worked for. And for that, I can't just forget. I heard a shaky breath on the other end. I know, she whispered. I know. There was silence for a few moments before she spoke again. But I want to make things right. I want to fix this, Mom. I don't want to keep fighting. I don't want to lose you. Her words felt like a punch in the gut, but they also felt like the smallest thread of hope. Maybe she was sincere. Maybe she wasn't. But I knew that I couldn't make the same mistake again. I don't know if we can just go back to the way things were, I said, my voice steady. But I'm willing to try. If you're really willing to change, then maybe we can find a way forward. I will, she said, her voice quiet but determined. I promise. After that conversation, I didn't know what would come next. I wasn't ready to fully trust her again, not yet. But for the first time in months, I allowed myself a sliver of hope. Maybe we could rebuild, piece by piece. But I also knew that it would take time, and it would take effort from both of us. I couldn't undo the past, but I could take control of my future. That was the one thing no one could take away from me. In the days that followed, I spent more time focusing on myself. I began to reconnect with old friends, ones I hadn't seen in years. I went for walks in the park, sat at cafes, and slowly, I started to enjoy my life again. I realized that the strength I had fought for wasn't just about fighting off the people who tried to take from me. It was about learning to live for myself, to live freely, without the weight of guilt or obligation hanging over me. Laura and I began to talk more, little by little. It wasn't easy. It wasn't perfect, but I could see a change in her. She was trying, and maybe that was enough. As for Peter, I hadn't heard from him since that day at the courthouse, and honestly, I wasn't sure I ever would again. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to wait around for him to change. I wasn't going to wait around for anyone to decide what my life should look like. I had already done that for far too long. I was going to live on my terms, in my home, surrounded by the memories of a life I had built with love and strength. And nothing, no one, could take that from me.